What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Facts on the Ground. I'm Jesse Zerwell, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Misty Winston. And today we're happy to have a repeat guest back on our show again, Robbie Jaeger. He's an independent investigative
Robbie.
journalist. He's the lead political finance reporter at MCSC Network, and he's been doing a lot of in-depth reporting lately on the oh geez, I'm blanking on the pipeline.
Colonial.
The
Colonial
Colonial
Pipeline.
Pipeline.
We were
The
literally
Colonial
just talking
Pipeline.
about it.
Yeah, scatterbrained. On the Colonial
Yeah.
Pipeline, and he's been doing a lot of both financial research and research into how that pipeline is being maintained or not being maintained. So we're going to talk about some recent updates on that and possibly get into another pipeline, the Penn East pipeline, which is smaller but still a
Pipeline.
yeah, still a pipeline, still harmful and still very problematic. So anyway, Robbie, thanks so much for joining us
Hey, no
again.
problem. Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Yeah, this is like one of my favorite spots to come, as you guys know. So, I'm really appreciative actually that you guys, have been so persistent in amplifying this story because I do think it's very important. So, yeah, I'm always glad to come by and talk to you guys. Appreciate it having me
Yeah,
on.
I 100% agree with you. And actually, I need to thank you. I think Jesse would agree with me, for catching a hold of this story and for being as tenacious as you have with it, because nobody's talking about this, which is mind-boggling to me now that I know about it. But it's really not getting any coverage at all. So really, just thank you for being somebody who is taking a look at this and really pushing it as hard as you can into the public conversation because I wanted to actually talk about this anyways, but you've been tweeting about recently the comparison between, like the Apple and some of the events that they've had, the leaks that they've had, and the comparison in size to the Colonial Pipeline spills. So can you talk a little bit about that and the vast difference and why this is such an important pipeline or such an important leak that we need to be paying attention to this?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of things to unpack, so I think like first of all we should, starting with the latest major update in the story of the leak, right? The 1.2 million gallon leak from Huntersville, North Carolina. It was August last year. For those who don't are first time hearing about it, Huntersville, North Carolina, last year, Colonial Pipeline spilled what they reported at the time was 63,000 gallons of gasoline in the Oler Nature Preserve. Months later, they had to revise their estimates. And then months later after that, they had to re-revise those estimates again. And finally, in January of this year, it came back as 1.2 million gallons. And it came from a leak from a crack at the site of a previous repair that could have gone on for weeks or days, weeks, or even possibly months. It was not detected by Colonial Pipeline. It was actually two teenagers riding their bikes through the nature preserve, smelled gasoline, and called someone to report it. So that's when I latched onto the story. That's when I did my reporting and found out that they had only checked at most 45% of their pipeline in the previous year, and that only 650 of those miles of those pipeline was checked for cracks, which is again what the leak came from. So since then, I've been following updates as far as what are regulators doing, what are what's their plans. At first it was really quiet, but lately we've had some things come out. So the state authorities has demanded a report from Colonial didn't quite give them everything they wanted, so they slapped them with some, hey, you're going to get some more violations. We want this, and this. You didn't give us all the information we wanted. So they're getting kind of hit on like a procedural front from the state regulators. But the big news in this case, and to me, this is the biggest update since the spill was revised, right? Or since our report on the inspections being just so lackluster. And that is just last week, the federal body that governs pipeline safety is the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration. I'm trying to make that acronym like a household name because it's actually
PHMSA.
PHMSA. That's the only way I know how to say it for
Right.
sure. But it should be
Maybe
a very
FIMSA?
important. Yeah, PHMSA. But it's a very important agency to know, because they're the governing entity, or the regulatory entity that oversees all fuel pipelines in the country. They're a division of the Department of Transportation, run by Pete Buttigieg nowadays. So this report that PHMSA filed regarding Colonial's 1.2 million gallon spill, and I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from it, because it's scathing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty damning. So here's the first quote. And I published this in my article that I recently wrote. You can check that on Rockfin or Medium if you guys want to find that after this interview or whatever, after you guys
We'll
done
link
watching
to
this.
it.
We'll link to
But either way, it basically, the report says, PHMSA's ongoing investigation indicates that conditions may exist on the Colonial Pipeline that pose a pipeline integrity risk to public safety, property, and the environment. So right off the bat, you've got the federal agency in charge of pipelines saying that, as it stands, without any kind of corrections, the way that it stands right now, the entirety of the 5,500 mile long Colonial Pipeline is a risk to public safety, property, or the environment. It goes on to say that Colonial's inability to effectively detect and respond to this release, as well as other past releases, has potentially exacerbated the impacts of this and numerous other failures over the operational history of Colonial's entire system. So that's basically the federal government saying that not only was your response and your methods of detection to this, which we learn a little bit more about in this report, but not only was your response and your detection on this incident lackluster, if just outright inadequate, but this is something that you've known for. This is the federal government acknowledging Colonial has a very long history of inadequate safety measures and inspection measures and leak detection measures, and just has a long history of failures that possibly could be prevented. Again, that's another big shot across the bow from the federal government. And this is something that I'm actually kind of surprised to see PHMSA hitting back so hard, which I'm glad to see, because, I'm hoping that, after we get done discussing the report, that, as we get into the DAPL discussion, it all ties together as to why this is so important. But it also goes in, after evaluating the preliminary findings. And remember, this is just a preliminary report. This investigation by PHMSA into Colonial Pipeline is ongoing, and this is just like the first of many reports, I'm sure, that will come out. But it says, after evaluating the preliminary findings of fact described below and considering the characteristics of the Colonial Pipeline system, as well as the failure history of that system, it appears that the continued operation of the Colonial Pipeline system without corrective measures would pose a pipeline integrity risk to public safety, property, or environment. So that's them just reiterating that. Like, as it stands, the entirety of that pipeline is a safety risk. It's a hazard, right? And this is another thing. This is the part that kind of also gave me pause when I read it, because it's kind of alluding to the fact that the whole entire pipeline could possibly be a ticking time bomb waiting for a spill. And it says here, the conditions and threats at locations of prior similar repairs, referencing the repair made in 2004 that spawned this massive leak. And the conditions and threats at locations of prior similar repairs potentially exist throughout the Colonial Pipeline system. So basically, at any point throughout the entire 5,500 miles, anywhere that there's been one of these repairs done, and there's been quite a few, it could be that's a potential for a leak, an undetectable 1,000,000+ gallon leak.
And
that could be. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's one of a bevy of things that's frightening about this pipeline, is that we keep hearing potential or potentially. So much hasn't been checked. And why is that? What's the cause of the neglect? What do you think?
They don't want to pay for it.
Well,
It's cost. It costs money to pay people to go out there and check this shit. They don't want to pay that, so they get away. I mean, if they can get the regulators to not enforce any real hard and fast rules, and they can pay, a dude to go out like every month or something and check like 100 feet of something, rather than pay somebody to be out there every day.
Yeah, I know there's a cost benefit analysis, but in the end, it's not going to look good. But I guess, if you go by BP as an example, then you really don't have to worry about anything.
Well,
right.
I would say a couple of things. So you referenced BP, and I'm assuming that you're referencing the massive oil spill.
Right.
Okay. So, as we've learned, not only from that incident, but from Colonial Pipeline again in the mid '90s when they spilled like a shit ton of fuel into the Reedy River in South Carolina. That was a huge ordeal. Also, Colonial Pipeline's new spill and all the spills in between, especially the BP spill. We only find out about these things when it's too late, right? We don't really have. We always have the discussion about how dangerous to the environment or to the public are pipelines and the oil drilling operations. We don't really have these discussions until we see the footage on television of the oil floating in the water, right? And I think that's part of it because it comes and goes with the news cycle. And the other part of it, I believe, is that the neglect. That's something that we call it because when we look at the numbers, it's like there's no way that's acceptable for inspection. That amount, when in reality,
I'm being
it
kind
is
with neglect.
Well, no, but in reality, and according to regulators, most of the time, that's all falling right within their bounds, which is a huge issue in and of itself. Which is why, over the course of reporting this story, I've been pushing just as hard. Not only do we need to hold Colonial Pipeline accountable for not only this spill, but as apparently the federal government agrees with me for once, that we need to hold them accountable for their history of spills as well. But we also need to retool from the ground up the way, not only the regulations themselves that govern the pipeline system, but the way we come up with those regulations, which in large part is, look, the oil and gas companies, through their trade association groups, such as the American Petroleum Institute, they have a hand in writing these rules. The federal government's rule of thumb, as I've said before, is to use, industry standards as a way to regulate most industries. And, who makes the industry standards? The API does, and other organizations like them. Who sits on the Rules Advisory Committee? The API does, and also Colonial Pipeline does at PHMSA. Like, Colonial Pipeline has a say, at least in some facet, of the way of the regulations that are formed at the federal regulator. They sit on the committee at PHMSA that does that. So, there's a lot of problems with the way that we even come up with the regulations, not just the regulations themselves. And that's a huge issue, a huge, huge issue, which is why it was so surprising to see PHMSA kind of coming at them so hard. Now, they haven't hit them with any hard punishments yet, just strongly worded letters and threats. But that's usually how these things start. But
wait, can I ask you a question real quick that maybe you may not have an answer? I don't know, but you were talking about how we need to start thinking about how we write these how we come up with these regulations. I'm also curious about how they're enforced. So is that who is going around and evaluating these pipeline companies and how they're doing their how protocols are being followed? Is there any regulatory process where there's some inspector that goes around to make sure that everybody's doing things the way that they're supposed to be doing, or is it left to the pipeline company themselves?
So here's the thing with that. From what I've been able to glean is that PHMSA does do on the ground inspections. They're obviously not going to inspect the entirety of a 5,500 mile pipeline themselves because that should be on the company, not PHMSA. That's number one. I mean, it is and it isn't, right? Okay, so
well, it should be, but I'm just shouldn't, okay, because I know you had talked about before about how Colonial Pipeline wasn't keeping good records at all, so there was no real records of what was. So I'm wondering where the disconnect is there, where we can't have a regulatory body that comes in and you have to have good records about what you have inspected and what you know what I mean? So that way
Right.
the governing body can just come in every once in a while, because obviously they can't be there all the time,
Right.
and just check in and make sure that process is being followed in order to prevent these things from happening. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of what I meant.
Well, it makes perfect sense. So here's the way I would explain it. Okay, so PHMSA, and from what I've been able to tell looking through their records, is that I'm not sure if anybody knows about like health inspections at restaurants, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
They just kind
very
of
familiar.
they just
I
kind
lived
of
in
yes,
I lived in New York for 10 years. I do.
and they just they don't
I'm
tell
a
you when they're
restaurant
coming.
girl. I come
Yep.
from restaurants. I'm married to a restaurant person. Yes,
Yeah.
I know all
Okay.
about it.
So
You know
they
better
don't
than
tell
I
you
do.
when they're coming. They don't tell you when they're coming. They just pop up whenever they feel like it, and they inspect you. Right now, usually, obviously, in the restaurant business, that's like a span of an hour or two, and they're out of there, unless you're having a problem. But in PHMSA's case, it could last anywhere from weeks to months to a year to do an inspection. And not all of that is going to be on the ground. A lot of that time is probably paperwork or analysis and stuff like that. But as far as what Colonial has to do, they have to file paperwork themselves every year. They have to file annual inspection reports. They have to file a report anytime there's any kind of leak or failure that falls within the guidelines of reportable leaks or failures, which is a very vague thing, basically. So, like smaller leaks and failures, like some of the ones that I've reported on may not have even been qualified to be reported. They just reported them anyway because right now they're under such a tight knit microscope. So as far as regulators, yeah, I mean, and you're right, they're not going to be there all the time. They're going to pop in, they're going to do what they think they're going to do. They're going to send you their findings, and then they're going to tell you if you don't fix it, we're going to fine you or something like that. And then they move on about their business. I mean, quite honestly, now if something like this happens, yeah, like what happened with Colonial, yeah, they're probably on their case a bit more now. But generally speaking, I mean, like I said, there's a reason why we don't hear about these things until after they've happened, because quite honestly, PHMSA themselves has been quite poor on holding these pipeline companies accountable for their years of neglect. And it's not just Colonial, but Colonial in general. It seems like something's
I
got
think
to
that's
explode.
generous. Poor is
Absolutely.
generous.
You
Yeah.
know, so that's something to look for. So and that's why we hope, like, hey, we can make this change happen now, but people got to actually know what the problem is. So but Misty, you said something about like just sending a guy out there to inspect a few hundred feet of pipe. That's literally fine from this report. That's literally what it sounds like they do. I mean, and honestly, it says here that the leak detection system, and we're talking about line one is the longest stretch of Colonial Pipeline, and it's also the part that leaked. So if you hear me reference that, that's what that is. It says the leak detection system used on the Colonial Pipeline system consists of a line balance approach to track volumes transported, basically saying that regular reporting between field stations and Colonial's control room. So basically, as the fuel moves through the pipeline, it passes through certain stations, and they're basically checking weight, right? And basically saying it's just the same amount the amount passing through now is that the same amount we put in, right? But apparently they can only detect within like 3% of total volume, and when you're pushing, millions upon millions of barrels a day, that 3%, because remember, one barrel is 42 gallons. So if you're pushing like whatever it is, 10 million barrels or 10 million gallons a day, and you're missing 3% of that, that's a pretty hefty volume, and you can't detect it. So the big thing here is it says the process is predominantly manual. Okay, just let that sink in. The process is predominantly manual, with a defined tolerance for any potential imbalance, i.e., a discrepancy between stations. Basically, there's leeway, right? So a certain percentage is acceptable if missing because it falls within that. Tolerance, as they say. Colonial Pipeline employs computational pipeline monitoring on portions of the system, but not on line one. So line one in particular, the one that leaked, is basically done by hand. To to say, not probably not literally, but I mean, I'm sure they use obviously some tools and technology to do it. But it's pretty much a man-governed process. They don't have like automated means of checking the pipeline. It's basically a guy analyzing data that appears whenever the pipeline or whenever fuel is flowing from station to station, and looking for discrepancies in weight that fall outside of the tolerance zone. So that's disheartening. If that's how they're checking for leaks, I would assume, since you're working with percentages, math would usually dictate that 3% of 10 million, that's a lot. And if that was to leak out, that would be a huge problem. So you probably need to find some technology that can get you down a little bit closer than 3%, because that just sounds inadequate to me. I mean, just, I don't know about, just with all the technology that we have these days, I feel like and all the money they make, for fuck's sake. I mean, they should be doing better than that, but nobody's making them.
Listen, as much money as they make, they should be able to pay somebody to go out there and do those manual inspections. If that's the best they can do right now, fine. But you should be able to pay somebody to be doing that regularly all across that pipeline, like not just a few hundred feet here and there, but you should be paying somebody to be checking that on the regular all across that pipeline. I mean, look, you're making a shit ton of money.
Yes, and they should be forced to be running automated inspection technology throughout the entirety of the pipeline. There should be no manual. I mean, the manual part should be to reinforce the findings of your computational automated part. And when you're $1 billion plus a year pipeline, killing it on your profit, by the way, the pandemic didn't hurt you at all, and their financial statements back that up. And you're backed by Koch Industries, you're backed by Royal Dutch Shell. Those are the people that pay your bills, or that that cash in on you. So how in the hell do you just not have there's no reason why you shouldn't be being held to a higher standard. You are the integrity of this pipeline, or any pipeline, is just as much of an important thing as far as our infrastructure as interstates or anything else like that, but they're forgotten about. They're not included. When people think DOT, they don't think gas pipelines. A lot of people think gas pipelines are oversaw by the Department of Energy or the EPA, but it's actually the DOT. People think DOT, people think infrastructure, people think roads, people think, public transit. They're not thinking about our other forgotten infrastructures, all these old decrepit pipelines, just like Colonial, began construction in the 60s. Almost the entirety of the portion that runs through North Carolina was built before 1980. So over 40 years old, almost throughout the entirety of the state. And people are wondering, and then look, PHMSA regulations only say you have to check it once every 5 years. And so if you got a 40,
so absurd.
So the next full inspection, granted, if just using theoretical math here, as far as like if they started the 5 years at the very first year of the pipeline's construction, then you're looking at least in North Carolina, that section of pipe will be 45 years old by the time this next inspection is completed. And just imagine how many more gallons could potentially leak, especially if they're going on for days, weeks, or maybe even months without detection. So here's what PHMSA is doing. PHMSA says, also in the report, just to kind of basically say, all right, this is what we found. Now this is what we want from you guys. They want a full evaluation of Colonial Pipeline's leak detection system, and a full they're going to take that evaluation, give it to a third party, that will be chosen by the federal government. And then they're going to make suggestions over improvements to be made to the leak detection system, and they're going to force Colonial to make those improvements under some kind of penalty or threat of some kind of penalty. They also are asking for a complete and total, basically history of every repair similar to the one that sprung a leak in Huntersville. They want to know where on the entirety of the pipeline any of those repairs have been made. Throughout the entirety of the system, which is like a giant troll job in one way to thinking about it, because that's Like going back 20 years, you want to know every repair that they've ever made. That's going to be a lot of paperwork. But on the other hand, if it is in the view of the federal government that any spot that such a repair was made is a potential leak hazard, then it would just be very interesting to see the map and all put a pin in every repair that was made along the entirety of this 12 state or so pipeline and just see and maybe be able to show people, hey, every place I put a pin on this map is a spot where gasoline could be leaking into the ground right now and you would never know it for weeks.
Yes.
And it might make somebody maybe be able to pay attention to it.
Speaking of maps, I've been trying to pull up and share the screen, but I can't seem to do it. So I took a picture on my phone, but I wanted to show viewers.
You want me to try to screen share it?
What's that?
What are you trying to look up?
So this is what the network
all the pipelines
of pipelines in the U.S. looks like. And all those in red are labeled as hazardous. And this data comes from the U.S. Department of Transportation itself.
Oh, so that's the authority.
But this data was last updated at the end of September 2013. So it's been a long time.
Did you see, now that map that you just showed everyone is
which I'll link
scary.
To in the show notes.
No, it's fine, but it's scary.
Yeah, it is.
Seeing how much and like potentially hazardous stuff is going on with this, and look, a lot of this is on the companies, as I've said, but there's also just the overarching theme of regulators just not doing good enough on tightening, we got to force them to do their jobs because it costs them money, as you alluded to. It costs them money to do these jobs. It costs them money to do these inspections. It costs them time. And quite honestly, they a lot of times would rather just, peel it back if they could. And PHMSA and state regulators alike are like, hey, you guys are bringing a lot of money through here. Where state regulators are more inclined to feel that way. PHMSA just is like, hey, you guys wrote the rules. You guys just do what you got to do. Just just know if you fuck up royally, we're going to have to do something because, that's technically what our job is. That's been their stance so far. It's been their stance for decades. And we're paying the price for it now. Now, here's the thing about DAPL, right? Now, as we all know, Dakota Access Pipeline is probably, other than the Keystone XL, which is now, it's been dead, but now it's dead. But Dakota Access Pipeline is probably the most notorious one that people know about. Everybody has heard about it. Everybody's seen, the Standing Rock protests. And I'd like to start out by saying that I find that those protests and people that oppose it are completely 100% right and justified. And I was with them in opposing it because, the way that it is all of it. And here's, look, before I get any deeper, my overarching thing about pipelines is this. And I've said this to you guys before, I know, perfect world, no pipelines. Real world, no new pipelines, right? So yes, I oppose any new pipelines, but I also accept the reality that once a pipeline gets started and actually starts moving fuel and generating money and theoretically bringing down gas prices in the area, people start seeing the money and it's really hard to shut them down once they get going. So when people that would basically just respond to my articles or like, oh, well, why don't you just shut Colonial Pipeline down? You can't, quite frankly.
Not yet. We need another energy system first. Yes. You gotta. You can't put the cart before the horse. You have to.
And now we're on a meta problem, right? Now we're on some big picture shit. But so when it comes to DAPL, like I said, it's infamous. It's got the politicians, the media loves it. Politicians politicize it because they know that it's a hot button issue. And they can get votes from it, right? Quite simply. And that's what politicians do. We know this. Activists love it because they can fundraise off of it. I'm not saying that I'm not okay. Let me be specific when I say that. I mean activism groups, astroturfed activism groups, dark money groups that prey on events like this to draw in people and fundraise from these events. I'm not talking about the on the ground activists
Right.
that want to do the right thing and travel all the way out there just to stand there and protect the water. I'm not talking about them, right? But I just want to be that clear because when I say activists, I should be
No.
a little bit more specific. What I mean is like Sunrise Movement,
Yeah.
350, those types of groups, right? Okay, so they love DAPL, like again, because that's where the popularity is, that's where the eyeballs are. So there's incentive for everybody to dogpile on that pipeline. But here's the thing: Dakota Access Pipeline has had one incident since May of last year, right? It was about 180 gallons. That's what the leak was, which is bad, right? Nobody wants to see that. Since that, but mind you, that's the last incident they had, and the last incident they had before that was sometime in 2018, and these are incidents reported to PHMSA. But since Dakota Access's last incident, Colonial Pipeline has had at least 10 such incidents, and for obviously over 1.2 million gallons, because one of those incidents was that 1.2 million gallon spill, and even without it, there would be several hundred gallons spilled with the other 9 incidents that they had. But you put 900 on the end of 1.2 million, there's really no point in saying that. So I mean, the numbers are definitely skewed, but it's the frequency as well. 10 incidents since DAPL's last one. So tell me again, and I've been searching for this like answer for, and it's not like I'm demanding one from you guys, but there's just the hypothetical. Why is it that DAPL, even though it's got it, like I said, it's had one incident in the last 2 years. Colonial Pipeline since 2017 has reported like 63 incidents to PHMSA. I just don't get it how the imminent threat is in the southeast. I mean,
Right.
And I mean,
But
I'm not saying that there aren't other pipelines doing just as poorly. I seriously, I
All
haven't looked
pipelines are
into it.
shit.
but
They
Yes.
absolutely
All
are.
pipelines are shit.
but
Yes.
for the media, DAPL is much sexier than
Yes.
Colonial Pipeline,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and that's not to in any way diminish the activists who were there and the work they did. I fully supported it, and I still support it. And if you look at the media coverage of DAPL at the height of the protests, at the height of the blockades and the activism that was going
The
on
water
there,
cannons and
you'll see that um, not only is the government response just outrageous, just atrocious, but all the media, at least the mainstream media, wanted to focus on was the protesters and are they being infiltrated by some nefarious group and do they really care? And never mind the water cannons shooting them in the dead of winter.
The private security.
The private
I
security.
mean,
Never
look at
never
what they
mind
did to Red Fawn Phallus.
never mind
I
that
mean,
this
there's
pipeline is cutting through and destroying indigenous people's land. It's like who is this motley crew out in the Midwest trying to make trouble over this pipeline? Like they want to be there doing that, I mean, they wanted to be, but
Well, look,
not for
I mean, my whole
enjoyment.
thing is like I have been trying to get a hold of like the activist groups that I mentioned earlier, like Sunrise, and even local chapters here in North Carolina.
we tried to get Bill McKibben on top of
And
it.
he spent as much time writing about it as he did the tweet that said he might write about it. And has put as much thought into it as about as much thought into both. And that was
We
disappointing
tried though.
because we tried, but here, and that's what I'm saying. So anybody that like I said, is DAPL is your most important issue, your most important environmental issue. As far as we need to shut down Dakota Access Pipeline. Well, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but as I've said before, Once a pipeline becomes operational, it's almost impossible to permanently shut them down. They may shut down for like emergency maintenance, or if there's a terrible incident like the explosion that Colonial Pipeline had in 2016 that caused a shutdown for several days. So, a shutdown for DAPL doesn't look likely to me at all. And
Right.
a permanent shutdown of Colonial isn't. But at this point, like I said, real world, no new pipelines, but the pipelines that do exist, they need to be held to a higher standard than your average forklift operator, right? They need to have accidents at a less frequency than a pizza delivery driver. You know what I mean? Like honestly, I mean, they're making billions of dollars. They get all of they get all of the easements and right of ways and all of the special breaks that they can think of. They write their own freaking rules. And yet they can't manage to not detect a leak that went on for days and days. And they don't really care. They're not held to any kind of real standard unless something actually happens. It's basically like, hey, you guys can basically skate by with the bare minimum, or not even really,
Not even.
we'll just pass you, right? But if somebody comes asking questions, we're going to have to throw you under the bus, meaning that we're not really going to bother you until you make us, i.e., you guys have a major spill and now we have to come down on you. Like, sorry, guys, we have to do something now,
Yeah.
But if
Like
you'd have been on
the
top
babysitter.
What was the response? Because I know they're responding now, but we didn't find out about this for months after it happened. It happened in August of last year, and I mean, you just caught a hold of it a couple of months ago. That's when I heard about it. So I mean, it really was suppressed.
well, that's
Do you
Colonial's
know
fault.
now that what's that?
I said, well, and I hate it. I'm sorry to interrupt. But
No,
I was
you're
just like,
fine.
the reason why so many people the people that didn't catch on to it until they did, that's Colonial's fault. Colonial reported 63,000 gallons as their initial estimate. And while that's a large number, not trying to say that it isn't, that's not going to break mainstream media, as far as size, right? What what got everybody's attention was, and this is actually on state regulators. This is the North Carolina Department of Economic or Environmental Quality. They basically said, no, these estimates don't look right. Give us more. And then when Colonial gave them more, they looked at those estimates and compared them to the amount of gasoline that Colonial said they had recovered, and those numbers were nearly the same, which is almost never ever the case. So that's why state regulators also said, we believe you've underestimated us again, and we need better numbers. So it went from 63,000 gallons to 250,000 gallons, all the way up to 1.2 million. And that, of course, is when, you see that, you're like, Jesus, like you undershot it by how much? There's a story there.
Big difference.
Yeah.
And it went from trying to find out, like, you think like, man, was there some kind of cover up or something like that? And look, I can't go throwing around those accusations. Not to say that I haven't tried. Look, if anybody that so happens to work for Colonial Pipeline and you want to talk to somebody about something, I'm your guy. But other than that, like, there's really no way for us to know that kind of information. But it became also more about, okay, what's Colonial Pipeline's track record? Awful. What's PHMSA's track record? Pretty much just as awful. So yeah, so now the story is highlight them both, make an example out of Colonial Pipeline, because again, people, if you care about Dakota Access Pipeline, shutting it down probably isn't going to happen. But if we don't make a very public example and rewrite the regulations and make Colonial Pipeline the shining new example of what it's going to take to operate a gasoline or any kind of pipeline going forward. If you want to get into the game, these are the rules you're going to have to play by. We're not going to be playing touch football anymore. It's all going to be, we're going to tackle your ass. You know what I mean? Like the kitty gloves are off. If you guys want to get in a game, you got to play by our rules. And we can make them do that, because if we don't, in 20 years, Dakota Access Pipeline is going to look exactly like Colonial Pipeline. And then you'll really have something to protest, because you're going to have Dakota Access springing leaks once every 8
That's a
months.
lot of water. Well, that's a lot.
Yeah,
The Dakota Access is by so much of a water source for so many people.
yeah.
I don't know how true that is of the Colonial Pipeline one, like what kind of impact it
Well,
would
I
have
mean,
on water sources. But
it could at any
DAPL,
point. Yeah, DAPL would
Um,
be a catastrophe. And the Colonial Pipeline, like I said, it runs through like 12 states, runs underneath rivers and a whole bunch, a lot of water, navigable waterways and, water sources, and if PHMSA's assessment is correct, which is kind of vindicating what I've been saying now for a couple of months, is that the entire system, the entirety of it, is the old decrepit leak machine and should be condemned, or foreclosed, condemned, wiped off the face of the earth, or at least completely piece by piece rebuilt and replaced if that's the
yes.
route you're going to take.
And they
So
have the money to do that. So
and if
do
they
it.
don't have the money, they
They
better find the
do.
fucking money. That's the
They
way. That's
do.
the attitude I would have if I'm PEMSA. Don't come to me
Mm-hmm.
complaining about, oh, it's going to be expensive.
It's
Oh,
too expensive.
I
Fuck
mhm.
don't
off.
care. Yes,
No.
exactly. Fuck off. Do the shit. Um, I mean, now you have to work around the fact that yes, if you shut down Colonial Pipeline, you're making gas prices skyrocket throughout the Southeast. So you do have to find a way to mitigate that damage while you do the repairs. Uh, which it's going to take some work, because you do have to take the economics of the thing into account, not just the economics as in the company's bottom line, like fuck them,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the
Right.
economics as the normal guy that, hey, every $5 that I have to spare, I have to put in my gas tank so I can get to work.
Mm-hmm.
I've been that guy. I know that guy. I know lots of those guys and women, and just, those are the people that'll be impacted when $5 only gets you 1 gallon of gas.
Right.
Right.
And a prolonged shutdown of Colonial Pipeline would cause conditions like that or worse.
Well, that's where
So,
we're headed though, because they're not taking care of it. So I mean, they need to take care of that because we are headed for that kind of a disaster. And they're not going to be impacted by that. The CEOs of this pipeline company are going to skate by fine. They have billions of dollars. The people in the communities that this will impact will be devastated, all because this dude is a greedy fuck who thinks he needs another, yacht or something. And it should be
Robbie,
the regulatory bodies job to make sure that doesn't happen. And because of the corruption and the completely incestuous, ridiculous, like, I don't know, like gigantic blob of satanic jello that is our political system and like the lobbyists and all that stuff, like they just get to write their own rules and the politicians make excuses for them and look the other way and accept their donations. And it's not good. It's a ridiculous system. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Robbie, how much of this neglect, again, I'm using a softball term for Colonial, but how much of it do you think, or is any of it on purpose on their part, so as to manipulate markets, for example?
well,
Uh,
that's
I know
kind
that
of hard.
that verges into the conspiratorial, but I'm just wondering if
Right.
you've seen any evidence of that in your research and reporting.
Well, I would like to start off by saying I don't put nothing past anyone,
Right.
especially any of these greedy fucks in the oil business. Uh, but I would have to say that, now look, when you want to start talking about money or price manipulations and stuff like that, then you would have to start digging into their tariff contracts and a whole bunch of other separate information that's kind of like a separate thing, from like the inspections and stuff I've been looking into. Although there is plenty of information to be found, crawling through their tariff agreements, and leasing agreements, transportation agreements, stuff like that. So I mean, that's an interesting question, and I think that would also have an overarching question. Really, is it not just Colonial, but how standard of a practice is that kind of manipulation throughout the entire oil and gas sector? Because, look, it started off just some of the most cutthroat people in America started this industry, and they still maintain it to this day. Why they don't, to your question, if they don't, Misty made a point that I haven't really thought the makeup as until she did, is that the pipeline is gonna get shut down one way or another, right? You're either gonna have to repair it for a little bit of time, right, or it's gonna be shut down for a longer period of time because it had an explosion or a massive leak into a river or some shit, and now you have to close it down. So you're gonna have to shut it down every once in a while, anyways. Or you could just run a parallel pipe. Here's the thing, and that's it.
Build a
That's
new one.
I mean, and I know look, I know people are going to yell and scream, right, about that, and I get it, but like, again, the pipeline apparently at this point, until we can find alternate methods of not only fuel, but also ways to transport them, the pipelines are here to stay. So as long as they're here to stay, we might as well make them as safe as possible. And we are not doing that right now.
No.
So if Colonial's alternative to actually shutting down the pipeline to repair it section by section would be to run a parallel pipe to it until it's completed, and then they can just link up the pipelines, at the ends or at all the connection points that it's currently connected to. I don't know. I don't know how you
honestly, like, I don't love that idea, but it's better than doing nothing.
Exactly. Something has to be done. That's the point.
Yes. Yep. I mean, this is like a no-brainer. It doesn't take anything but common sense to see that that's where we're headed. This pipeline is either going to have a massive, like, it's already had a massive leak, but there's going to be a disaster at some point. And so I would rather, if I were them, if I were a rational thinking, logical adult, which they clearly don't seem to be, I would want to just like kind of take those like incremental, okay, we're going to fix this section and we'll, just like completely revamp. Let's go. We're going to do all new stuff. Like, let's make it as safe and as clean and as, good as possible. And just do that piece by piece by piece by piece. As long as it takes to get it done. I don't care how expensive it is. I would much rather do that than have a major disaster on my hands and devastate populations across multiple states, and cause an economic crisis. But again, they don't care because that really will not affect them. There will be no repercussions. We've seen it time and time again. Companies get caught like dumping stuff, toxic waste or whatever, and there's never any repercussions. There's never any consequences for this stuff. So they don't care. They don't care about you and your family and how that might devastate your community. They don't care about the rising gas prices. They don't care about the devastation of the environment. All they care about is making the next dollar, and they'll do whatever they have to do that, and they will take as many shortcuts as they can to make as much of that dollar as they possibly can. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and Colonial will never do any of those things that you said without the federal government breathing down their neck every second of every day.
Won't force them without public pressure, I don't think.
Exactly. So it's a domino
the scathing report that they put out, that's great, but it's just a report. I want to see actual accountability. Then I'll be excited about it, because I've seen the strongly worded letters.
Oh, yes.
And the bold tweets, and I'm not impressed. So
my hope is that strongly worded letter, that report, and this is why you guys are so great, because you're amplifying it. And that's what our job is to do as, journalists and activists, is to take these things and be like, hey, put a megaphone on things like this. Like, hey, you might not like the federal government, and you're right. Look, the strongly worded letter is a trend with them, but you never know when you read that strongly worded letter through a megaphone, who's going to hear it. And maybe you just hope that hey, this is the report that gets people on board. It makes them realize how big of a problem it is. So you're right. We need public pressure on the government to put pressure on Colonial Pipeline. We need pressure to put, politicians need to be on this. But I'm sorry, like, okay, DAPL isn't going anywhere, and quite honestly, it's safer than Colonial Pipeline. I hate to use the word safe at all when we're talking about these things, but everything is relative, and let's just be for real. The data backs it up.
Yeah.
Colonial Pipeline is not safe. In terms of what's safer, DAPL is by far, it's much newer, which is a large part of it.
Right.
And you citing these statistics, which come from reality, doesn't mean you support the DAPL pipeline.
Right.
It doesn't mean you support any pipeline.
That's just an objective look at facts.
Yes, right. And it's my plea to all of the activists, politicians, and
Anybody that cares.
anybody that mobilized or organized or protested DAPL, any of the politicians and celebrities or whoever that is still on the DAPL story. Basically, me pointing out these stats, you're right, it's not an endorsement of DAPL. It's my plea to those people that care about DAPL to realize that we have an imminent threat on the other side of the country, and that unless
we need to
do
tweet storm it.
and we can do something about this, like the government could, Pete Buttigieg could walk into work tomorrow and probably with the blessing of his boss at least, but he could walk into work
CIA
tomorrow
director.
and say that I want a total overhaul of PHMSA on my desk within a month, right? A plan, an internal plan. He could have, we could have the squad. Like, honestly, you could have AOC tweet about this story one time,
right,
and have it go
she's
viral.
The queen of the Green New Deal. Surely she must care about this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, and that's why, like, I put so much pressure. If Bernie Sanders were to tweet about this, another politician that's supposed to really care about the environment and who has been on against DAPL, he was against Keystone, same like the squad members, the same like Sunrise Movement, Bill McKibben, the list goes on and on. That's why I'm beating down their door, because their megaphone
Josh
is
Fox mentioned this at all? Do you know?
Not that I know of, but then again, I haven't actually looked to see.
Is that the Gasland guy?
Yes, he's. Never mind.
But regardless, is that I'm not AOC's biggest fan. I'm not any of their biggest fans. Really, I'm not a big politician guy, but I realize that the platforms they have. I realize that, as pathetic as it is, hero worship and politician worship is a thing in this country.
And celebrity worship.
It's the same thing. And if any of them wanted to shoot an actually important story through their massive megaphone, I would welcome that. I'm not saying that DAPL is not worth that megaphone, but what I'm saying is that DAPL is going to become the Colonial Pipeline unless we make an example to the entire pipeline industry that what Colonial Pipeline is will no longer be tolerated going forward. And if we had political pressure on politicians to put pressure on the administration and on these companies and on regulators to make this change happen, this is change that could happen. This isn't Medicare for all level change, okay? This is a strict regulatory review, right? This is something that could be probably done internally should we be able to trust them enough to actually do it themselves. But we can't, just like we can't trust the pipeline companies to actually keep things safe. We can't trust the government to do pretty much anything.
It's the cops investigating themselves.
Yes. And, with the government, like, again, government is just like any other major corporation. They're not going to do anything unless the public makes them, right? The corporations didn't give a damn about police brutality until it became fiscally advantageous for them to be so.
Or gay rights.
Or anything. And
yeah.
I'm just using that as an example. This is the way it works. The government, politicians work the same way. Unless they know their constituents. Yeah. Anything. Yeah. Unless they know that they can manipulate or get votes or donations out of the situation, they're probably not going to have much to do with it. And while, yes, AOC is not going to get any votes from anybody in North Dakota, but that's a national story. And as serious as an issue as DAPL is, I'm just trying to, again, say, if you guys care about DAPL, we really need your help here, because we have the opportunity to really turn things around or make things at least safer for years and years until inevitably, another administration comes in and cuts back regulations, as they are wont to do.
This is the song that never ends.
So, I mean, it's just one of those things. So am I just screaming into the wind? Possibly, but,
You're not, though. Trust me, because I run into the same stuff with Assange, and you have to just keep at it. Like that's what I'm saying. We need to tweet storm it, because that's effective. Like, people give Twitter a lot of shit, and it is a hell site, but it is an effective method of relaying messages and grabbing people's attention at times. So yeah, we should totally tweet storm that. I don't know why we haven't thought of that before.
Yeah, like I said, one tweet from AOC or Bernie Sanders about the Colonial
Huge.
Pipeline, it'll be trending tomorrow.
I mean, yeah,
That's how huge it
that's
is.
why like people laugh at me because like today I was like tweeting at Kim Kardashian and Britney Spears and Chris Evans and
Yeah,
like, it's because they have influence, as disgusting as that is and as
Right.
weird and bizarre as it is that some celebrity or pop star or whatever has that much influence over public discourse and opinion. It's the truth. And if you can
But-
get those people to speak on an issue, you suddenly have millions of eyes
yeah.
on that issue.
But the point is not the celebrity. Well, the celebrity support is important, but the main point is that they have a huge platform and they're making people aware and influencing people with regard to Julian Assange and what he's gone through and WikiLeaks. And
That's why when people get mad
You know,
because
it doesn't-
Jimmy
it
Dore
doesn't
goes
mean-
on Tucker Carlson to talk about Julian Assange, it doesn't make any sense. That dude has 5 to 6 million viewers every single night, and to go on there and talk about Julian Assange, that's an amazing thing. That's an amazing thing. Everybody, if you care about an issue, you should be willing to go on anybody's show who has 5 or 6 million viewers and exploit the fuck out of their platform to push your agenda. Duh,
And then-
come
and
on.
People were riding his ass because he didn't speak about Medicare for all. He wasn't invited on the show to speak
That
about
wasn't
Medicare
the
for all.
point of the yeah.
Yeah.
I love when they do that. It's really just straw manning. It's really just them wanting to be mad at Jimmy Dore and not wanting to talk about the real issue, which is the fact that we can't get progressives to fight for a floor vote on Medicare for all, despite the fact that they promised they would do it.
Mhm.
So fuck those people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, it's tough, man. Like that's why this is the more I've been diving into this story, the more like bleak it becomes. You know what I mean? Because you can see like there are solutions that can be made. Like we just spitballed a few of them over the course of just discussing the story.
Mhm.
But again, I feel like it's the attention is misdirected. DAPL is what it is. It's not going anywhere. And Jesse, I every time, last 2 times we've done this show, we meant to really talk about the PennEast, man, the PennEast pipeline. And I'm sorry again that we probably won't really be able to get into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can
But
save it
to
for another
mention it,
episode.
We can have
but-
you back. Yeah.
but to bring it up, real quickly is that, again, the Biden administration is backing them in a Supreme Court case.
Right.
And that kind of circles back to, we can't put faith in the federal government because, they're going to do whatever it is they want to do. Like, they're giving, for one thing, the Biden administration, obviously no rational person was expecting them to be climate warriors. They spent the entirety of the primaries trying to calm the emotions of scared Republicans that thought that we were going to end fracking. And he was like, no, he sent Kamala Harris out there to basically say, don't worry.
We're not gonna end fracking.
We're not going to end fracking.
Amazing.
Hey,
wasn't
guys,
talking when
don't-
she said
Don't
that.
frack out.
Yeah. When she said that, she
As she
wasn't talking
laughs.
she wasn't talking to Democrats when she said that.
No.
She wasn't talking to liberals. She was talking to Republicans and conservatives when she said that. That's Biden's shtick. It goes back to what Jesse said earlier with the sexy story.
Mhm.
Keystone was a sexy story. It was also not completed yet, which made it really easy to kill. And it
Right.
made it really politically expedient to do so. Because not only do you not have to deal with any real ramifications, yeah, you're going to get conservative media jumping all over you about the killing of the jobs. But
Tarzan's was like that too. I don't know if anybody even remembers that anymore.
Yeah.
so I mean, but and so that's why you do that. But the Biden administration, again, backing a pipeline, basically saying the pipeline is basically, to give it a brief overview. I'm gonna talk about it anyway because fuck time limits. So PennEast pipeline it's a much smaller pipeline. That and I might be mistaken, Jesse. It ends in New Jersey and it runs through
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it starts in Pittstown, Pennsylvania, I believe, and it runs
What a great name for a town.
Right?
it runs southeast into I believe Hunterdon and Mercer counties, which are in the southeast of Jersey.
Okay, so the dispute, from what I understand, in the Supreme
I'm
Court.
sorry, southwest of Jersey. And But
Oh, yeah.
the southeast of Pennsylvania, I believe,
Right.
to the southwest of Jersey.
So the dispute in court basically is New Jersey doesn't want to grant Penn East Pipeline an easement, essentially, basically, which of course would be like eminent domain,
Right.
honestly. Colonial Penn East wants to use eminent domain in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey doesn't want them to. That's basically where they're at. Biden administration is actually taking the stance of the pipeline company in this. It's a minor legal story, right, for a very small pipeline, but it's a great snapshot of the Biden administration's climate agenda domestically, right? So yeah, you want to shut down Keystone. It wasn't operational. It's a great political win. I think anybody can see that. But also, because honestly, when you ask people, if you were to ask somebody, let's just say during up until the end of 2020, if you asked a normal person, I need you to name a oil pipeline in the United States. If this was Family Feud, most of the points would be in the top two answers, and it would be Dakota Access and Keystone.
Mhm.
You might get a couple points somewhere else, but I mean, honestly, that's the way people look at it. General population at large. So yes, it's a huge win. But on the smaller pipelines, we can go back them in a Supreme Court case to, make sure that they can basically obfuscate land from a state to build their pipeline because the federal government said it's okay. Um, you know,
And from
it's
property owners.
of course, and so there's oh god, eminent domain. That's his own bit of fascist shit, isn't it?
Well,
But we could get into
let me
that. But
let me ask you something, Robbie, about eminent domain as it pertains to Penn East, but I think to every other pipeline as well. I went to Penn East's website and went to their FAQ, and there was a question, something like, if, like, under eminent domain, if the government seizes my property, they didn't say seize. It was very gentle language. If the
yeah,
government
seizes.
if the
That's what he
government
does.
permanently borrows my property or to to build this pipeline, will I lose my property? And it's
Yes.
the answer is no. You will not lose your property on the website.
Okay. All right. So we're talking. So eminent domain is different than an easement, I would assume. So like I would assume if Penn East
This
has
is
a
eminent domain.
well,
This isn't an
well,
easement.
eminent domain generally would mean that the government is taking your land.
Mm-hmm.
An easement would be like what telephone companies do, power companies do, and they run power lines or cable lines through your property, and
Mhm.
you still own that property, but except for the part that they ran the line through. So I
Right.
mean, I mean, honestly, I don't know enough on that on the
We should look
semantics of
into
that
it and then
subject.
do a show on it, Jesse, because that's like
I mean,
Yeah,
interesting.
look,
I
because the
I don't
government
know.
uses eminent domain a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and the utilities use it with the backing of government, state governments especially. Duke Energy, like right here in the southeast where I live, they'll eminent domain the shit out of you if they want to, I mean, but also on the other hand, my uncle just had to move out of his house of 25 years last year because the state of North Carolina decided they wanted to put a highway through his backyard. So they eminent domained his ass out of his house. And so I mean, look, it's a terrible way to do business. It's like, hey, we want to build a road through here. Well, I own this property, you can't. And they said, well, we're going to anyway. And
Yeah,
that's pretty much what the government does whenever they fucking feel like it.
you're right. It's
So
seriously fascist shit.
but yeah, but there's one little, how we mentioned infrastructure, or I might have mentioned it because I talk a lot, and I'm sorry if I feel like I've ran my mouth
No,
like this whole
no.
show.
Not at all.
Um, but Biden just unveiled his infrastructure plan. Right now, I'm not sure. I'm not. You guys might have heard it's like 2.2 trillion in infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Roads, rail, whatever. That's just all well and good. As I mean, they are falling apart, and we needed to do something eventually. Someone did. Again, that's a no-brainer. Like Biden is doing the like least,
Bare
like
Yeah.
the
minimum.
bare minimum, but he's doing the easy. He's got the easiest wins Yes, we need money for infrastructure. Duh. Okay, nobody's going to say.
Presidents been doing that since
Forever.
Eisenhower?
Oh yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And so, but I'm interested to see the letter text of a bill when it becomes available. So I can actually search through the text of the bill. But from all of the plans and the synopsis and everything that he's released about this infrastructure plan so far, absolutely no mention of pipeline infrastructure. None of that 2.2 trillion is going towards pipelines, as far as I know. Like I said, all that's been released
pipelines
as far as
why would he mention pipelines when he has Burisma tattooed on his ass?
Yeah, that's true. But but seriously, it is technically
no, I don't
considered.
think it's on his ass. That's a tramp stamp, homie, for sure.
It's considered infrastructure. It's under the purview of the Department of Transportation. It's part of our national infrastructure. Again, I mean, look, say what you want about the pipeline system, but again, they're national security risks. If you really think about it, a coordinated attack on our pipeline system could really hurt and potentially cripple the infrastructure of our country, at least temporarily. So they're very important. And whether or not it's an effort like I just an attack, or if it's just an outright system failure from negligence and falling apart, both things are true, both things are possible, and both things should be safeguarded against and seen as important. Unfortunately, as far as, like I said, they've only released a summary of the plan. As far as I know, I haven't seen an actual bill introduced. So I can't say for sure. But in that pretty detailed summary, no mention of pipelines, which isn't a good sign for what the actual bill is going to look like. So it doesn't seem like, as far as priorities, as far as infrastructure priorities, as far as the new infrastructure bill with Biden, it doesn't seem like the pipeline issue is going to be addressed, at least in that regard, if at all, which is kind of, I don't
think that should surprise anybody, given the amount of money he's taken from oil and gas companies
over the course of his career. Absolutely, he would still be taking that money. He can't do it now. Right. Nobody can now because it's such under a microscope. But yeah, of course, until it was under a microscope, you absolutely bet your ass he was taking that money. Absolutely.
And they still very much own him. He still very much owes them favors. That's very clear. It doesn't matter that they're not able to donate to him directly anymore currently. He still is in their pockets without question. Nobody should ever doubt that. So yeah, I know, Robbie, that you have to go. I just want to thank you again for covering this story. First of all, you're doing unbelievable work. I don't think people tell you enough how good you're doing on this story and others. But yeah, just tell everybody where they can find your stuff. We'll obviously link to everything in the show notes so that they can find you easily. But yeah, just give everybody a heads up where they can find you.
Sure. So again, thanks you guys for having me on. It's been a blast, like it always is. You guys do great work, and I'm glad you guys are finally part of MCSC fam.
Yeah,
thank you.
So that's great teammates. But yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter and Rockfin, both. Twitter for my shit talking and some breaking news tidbits that I come up with, possibly in the morning, possibly in the middle of the night. So turn your notifications on if you really want to see what happens. I never really know. I could break news whenever because I just get bored, and that's what I do in my spare time. But also you can find me on Rockfin, all my articles and stuff. Both of them you can find me at ROBLET Fire. Roblet O'Fire. And before I get out of here, like I always like to say, if any of your viewers have a few minutes of free time tonight, I encourage everybody to just take a couple minutes and read up on some literature on autism and its effects on children, just so we can help build a more inclusive and educated society for our neurodiverse brothers and sisters out there. But other than that, guys, that's all for me tonight. So I really appreciate you having me on again.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks everybody for watching. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Robbie.
Yeah.